Okay, so you listed off a long list of symptoms, which I would imagine most of the people watching this have experienced some version of those symptoms or multiple of those symptoms. How do people go discerning whether these are actually caused by EMS or something else?
This is the problem. This is the big problem. And there is a long list of symptoms. I mean, I only mentioned a few, like brain fog is another one I didn't mention,
Sure.
but now I have. It is incredibly difficult. And this is why I realized that I was actually very fortunate in what happened to me, because I had the reaction. I knew it was my cell phone. It was that obvious.
Mhm.
Whereas, unfortunately, what's happening with many people is, well, this is a thing, really, this is the key thing of this talk, if you want. And this is what I've learned from the science, is that EMFs affect everybody. Some people can feel it. I can still feel it. I don't get the debilitating symptoms, but I can still feel it. But EMFs are impacting everybody. And it's just, yeah. And so whether you feel it or not, they are impacting your, and when we say impacting, they are damaging your biology, your cellular function at some level, because it's all about the cells. When we look about, how do EMFs impact the body, when we're talking about these adverse biological effects, again, which there are thousands of studies. For instance, a great resource is the Bioinitiative report, which first came out in 2007, which reviewed 30 years of science on this. And that was updated in 2012. And in the 2012 version, they reviewed the 1,800 studies in the intermediary period. So between 2007 and 2012, another 1,800. And this is a report which was created by independent scientists, researchers, public policymakers. And really the clear call to action was that the existing guidelines, safety guidelines, don't protect us at all.
Mhm.
Really not at all. Yeah, so many adverse biological effects. It's all about how it affects the cells,
Mhm.
and it is complex, and I can go into that a little bit if you want.
Sure.
But it impacts the cells, and what impacts your cells impacts your tissues. What impacts your tissues impacts your organs.
Yeah.
And we know it impacts the brain, and we know it impacts the gut, for instance.
Mhm. So I imagine, as I'm listening to this, and thinking of like, if someone wants to test if they're sensitive to a food, if they're reacting or allergic to a food, they would cut that food out, and then if their symptoms get better, then they can attest those symptoms to that food. Is it the same thing? Like, do you need to just detox from Wi-Fi and EMFs for a week or so, and then see if your symptoms improve?
Well, yeah, actually, well, that is one of the recommendations that I have. This is a way, that is exactly it. It's rather difficult to do, actually, but I have a slight refinement on what you just said. And that is to go, you don't really need a week. Mostly, you can, if you're, well, if you're symptomatic and you go camping in the woods, up a mountain, not
Yeah,
necessarily up a mountain, but you go
yeah,
away from things. Don't take your
yeah.
cell phone, get away from things. And that contact with nature obviously will just be beneficial in itself.
Mhm.
But then if you notice that there's an improvement in your condition, that your symptoms have reduced, obviously, compared to when you're in your normal environment, then this is a good indicator.
Mhm.
Now there are some biomarkers. There's a gentleman called Professor Belpom, actually in Paris, funnily enough, who's
Mhm.
studied this and has noted that some biomarkers that can indicate that people are electrically hypersensitive. But it's really difficult, really, to pinpoint that it is EMFs. And
Mhm.
so for most people, the thing is to, yeah, I say to people, look, don't just listen to me, do your own research on
Sure.
this. Okay, so maybe what I'm saying has interested you in some way, because it's, people are, there's different categories of people but the kind of person that's listening to this today is almost certainly health conscious, wanting to do something to improve their health, learn whatever they can, steps to improve their health. And we do so many things like being careful about what we eat and detoxing and working out and all these, being careful with relationships even, and things like this. And that's good for your health. And yet we're overlooking this really big elephant in the room, which is EMFs, which is a major cellular stressor, and which causes premature aging, according to studies again. And just, even if you don't get cancer, or it's not a question of getting cancer or whatever. I mean, it's studies are linking these exposures to cancer, to Alzheimer's, to Parkinson's, to just about every neurodegenerative disease that you can imagine, to leaky gut, to really, honestly, you name it. The science is out there. It's not well known, but it's good science. It's strong science. So yeah, the links are there.
Yeah, certainly plenty of research out there, and I know that they could find a lot of that research on your website. So I do want to mention that your website is electricsense.com. You've got a lot of great articles on there, and a lot of the research is on there. So I do want to encourage people to go check out your website. Let's talk about the connection with the gut, because you mentioned you had gut symptoms when you were exposed to these. And I think, again, thinking back about, what a microwave does to food. It basically kills any form of life in that food, in the process of heating it up. So, I can't help but imagine that as we're enveloped in these microwave radiation, what's that doing to our gut microbiome, to our intestinal, lining and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this happened to me. It was actually, I thought I was over it, and it sort of came back like a boomerang, the whole thing with the gut. And then I started researching it a bit. And so, yeah, I mean, the microbiome, this amazing thing, all this bacteria, this really, all these microorganisms. In fact, there's more microorganisms. We're made of more microorganisms than we are our own cells. I mean, there's that many of them. Many of them. There's like 100 trillion or something. Don't know if anybody's ever really counted them. And many different species, something like 1,000 species, from what I understand. And what's important, and I'm sure that you've covering this on your event, if with regard to the gut, is that we've got like 80% of our immune system in our gut. So it's super important. And if we disrupt our gut microbiome, then this will at some point lead to what I call dis-ease, and which can be a long list of dis-eases, and notably autoimmunity. So EMFs is this big overlooked factor. And there's really two aspects from the science which I can share with you. First one is that EMFs tend to cause bad bacteria to overgrow. And the second one is that they reduce the amount of good bacteria in your microbiome. That's to say what you need to digest and absorb food and so on. And then it gets worse. So if that's not already bad enough, is that EMFs can also cause this good bacteria to become pathogenic, that's to say, to go bad, and also cause proliferation of pathogens and create a kind of resistance to antibiotics. And there's one, notably, there's been a study done on this with E. coli. So E. coli is just like one of the thousands of bacteria which is in your gut. And E. coli, there's like a balance, because this is a kind of a mutually beneficial relationship, because it's not like that's the whole thing to understand with the microbiome. It's not like it's bad, the bacteria is bad. We got this idea bacteria is bad. It's not that bacteria is bad. It's when it's kind of out of control, disturbed by I don't know what chemicals and stuff, and EMFs, which is, as I'm explaining, that's what's bad, is when it's no longer this natural balance has been upset. That's what's bad. And this proliferation of bad, what we call bad bacteria, too much of a certain bacteria, and let's put it like that. That's the problem. So E. coli is one form which can become very negative and pathogenic. So we get an overgrowth of this E. coli. And this is associated with a whole load of conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, and diarrhea, and things like that. So I'll share with you a study. Yeah. We got a 2017 study out of Iran on this, which found two things. When bacteria like E. coli is exposed to cell phone or Wi-Fi radiation, its growth rate was significantly faster. Yeah, so that ties in what I was saying before. And it found that within a 6-hour window after exposure, the bacteria was more resistant to antibiotics. So this is quite a big deal, you know, this antibiotic resistance, because antibiotics, I'm not really one for antibiotics, but I do realize that in certain circumstances, they can be a lifesaver. And if we're developing antibiotic resistance in the population as a whole, then, you know, this is really serious. And in fact, according to some experts, could be one of the biggest threats to global health. So yeah, and then we've got another 2016 study which highlighted the consequences of these millimeter waves. So what are millimeter waves? Well, when we're talking millimeter waves, we're talking 5G. Okay, and I can expand on what exactly 5G and why that's important to, you know, understand, and what there is to know about, understand about 5G. But this 2016 study found that there are changes in the sensitivity to different chemicals of bacteria. So that's what there is to understand. It's not just the EMFs, it's the EMFs with the chemicals, with the antibiotics, perhaps, with all the other crazy things we're doing, you know, the processed foods and the GMOs and all the other things that are just an assault on our gut. And the other aspect here, important aspect, is because as EMFs impact us in so many different ways, but one of the important ways it impacts us is that it causes inflammation. And there's some really brilliant work being done by a gentleman called Dr. Martin Pall, P-A-L-L, who's out of Washington State, professor emeritus at Washington State University. And he kind of put 2 and 2 together and discovered that these EMF exposures were impacting the cell membrane. And in the cell membrane, there's something called the voltage-gated calcium channels. And these are gateways, if you want, that let in and out calcium. And when we're zapped by EMFs, which everybody is more and more, then it dysregulates this normal functioning. We get too much calcium in the cells, and this creates free radicals. Now, you know, like free radicals is like the leading theory on disease. Free radicals, oxidative stress, peroxynitrite to be precise, and just a whole long list of effects downstream of these exposures. And, you know, like 5 seconds floods the cell with just millions of these calcium ions.
So 5 seconds of exposure to EMF or to 5G.
5 seconds of exposure to EMFs, actually microwave radiation to be precise. Yeah, okay. Radio frequency microwave radiation, like your cell phone, like your Wi-Fi, like your Bluetooth, whatever it is, gadget. That's how fast and how significant it is. So that's so we've got this inflammatory aspect. There's many aspects, but obviously this inflammatory aspect is relevant to what we're talking about today, because that's what's happening often when we talk about leaky gut and different things which are happening with the gut. It's inflammation.
Sure.
And so, yeah. And so there is, I'm not going to say, Joe, that this is clear cut, you know, but what I'm saying is there's sufficient evidence out there on this question. I mean, there are aspects of EMFs which are really clear cut, because there's so much science, but there's less science on this. But for me, it's pretty obvious what's going on.
Yeah, and I think people realize that, especially particularly with leaky gut, which we're hearing a lot about, obviously on this series, that is caused by inflammation and some other mechanisms there. Um, and if we can, if the EMFs are causing inflammation, and it's particularly if they're disrupting the balance in microbes, there's a horribly perfect storm here.